Have you ever wondered what would happen if you discovered that your entire understanding of spirituality was built on a fundamental misconception? What if the very foundation of how you approach the divine has been keeping you trapped in a cycle of spiritual frustration and disconnection? This isn't just a hypothetical question. It gets to the heart of one of Jesus's most profound yet misunderstood statements. You are gods. When most of us hear these three words from Jesus, we tend to brush past them as merely poetic or metaphorical, perhaps even a bit too mystical or controversial to take literally. But what if this declaration wasn't just symbolic language? What if Jesus was revealing something radical about your true identity that could completely transform your spiritual journey? Has this ever happened to you? You find yourself praying fervently, perhaps during a moment of crisis or deep need, yet feeling as though your words are simply dissipating into the void, as if there's an unbridgeable gap between you and the divine presence you're trying to reach. That sense of separation isn't accidental. It's the result of a spiritual paradigm that has dominated religious thinking for centuries. Most of us have been conditioned to approach our relationship with the divine from a position of fundamental separation. We view ourselves as distant from God, like spiritual orphans desperately trying to get the attention of a powerful but somehow remote parent. We plead, we bargain, we make promises, all operating from the underlying assumption that we exist apart from the divine source we're attempting to connect with. But what you're about to discover in this video might completely reshape how you understand your place in the cosmos. The revolutionary truth behind Jesus's "You are God's" declaration isn't about elevating human ego or making grandiose spiritual claims. It's about recognizing an essential reality about your true nature that has been hidden in plain sight. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this exploration, because we're going to unpack what happens when you truly awaken to this understanding. This isn't about adopting a new belief system or adding another spiritual concept to your collection. It's about experiencing a fundamental shift in consciousness that changes everything about how you relate to the divine. When you begin to grasp what Jesus really meant with those three powerful words, you'll notice that your prayers transform from desperate pleas into conscious recognition. Your spiritual practice evolves from exhausting effort into natural allowing. The very foundation of your spiritual experience shifts from an ongoing struggle into an effortless unfolding of what has always been true. This paradigm shift challenges the very core of traditional religious thinking, the idea that you must somehow bridge an impossible gap between yourself and the divine. But what if there was never a gap to begin with? What if the spiritual journey isn't about becoming something you're not, but recognizing what has always been true about who you really are? When you look at how Jesus himself approached his connection with the divine, you notice something remarkable that traditional religious teachings often gloss over. Throughout his ministry, Jesus never once approached God from a position of separation or lack. Have you ever noticed that? He never begged, he never pleaded, he never bargained with the divine as if trying to convince a reluctant deity to help him. Instead, Jesus spoke with an unwavering confidence that mystified those around him. This wasn't spiritual arrogance or religious showmanship. It was the natural expression of someone who fully understood his relationship with divine source. Jesus operated from a profound mindset shift, a recognition of an eternal truth that existed before time began. If this message resonated with your spirit, hit subscribe and join our community of seekers exploring these profound spiritual truths together. The hidden truth behind Jesus' approach was his deep understanding that the divine nature isn't something external or separate from us. It's not a distant power we need to reach through spiritual effort, religious rituals, or perfect behavior. This is the revelation that turns our conventional spiritual journey completely upside down. What Jesus was desperately trying to help humanity understand is that your divine nature is your original identity, your true self beneath all the layers of conditioning and false beliefs about separation that have accumulated throughout your life. This isn't just a beautiful spiritual concept. It's a revolutionary understanding about the fundamental nature of reality itself. Behind the scenes of Jesus' teachings was this consistent revelation. You are not a human being trying desperately to connect with God. You are divine life temporarily expressing through human form. The impact of this understanding cannot be overstated. It completely transforms the decisions you make in your spiritual practice and in your everyday life. When Jesus declared, "You are God's," he was pointing to this profound truth about your original nature. The divine isn't something you need to search for, strive toward, or somehow convince to help you. It's who you are beneath the surface-level identity that feels separate and limited. This understanding completely reshapes the spiritual journey from one of acquisition to one of revelation, uncovering what has always been true rather than striving to become something you're not. Think about how this mindset transformation might change your approach to prayer. Instead of begging an external power for help, you begin recognizing the divine qualities already present within your true nature. Instead of approaching the divine as a beggar, you approach as a conscious expression of that same divine life. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring a powerful metaphor that illuminates this truth in a way that's impossible to forget. Because once you truly grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's," your entire spiritual journey undergoes a profound transformation. From seeking to finding, from striving to allowing, from separation to recognition of what has always been true. If you're feeling a resonance with this truth deep within you right now, write in the comments, "This awakens something in me." Imagine for a moment what your life would look like if you approached each day, each challenge, each relationship from the consciousness that Jesus had when he declared, "You are God's." This isn't just a minor adjustment to your spiritual practice. It's a complete transformation of consciousness that revolutionizes every aspect of your life. When this understanding truly takes root within you, your prayers undergo a remarkable metamorphosis. They shift from desperate pleas addressed to a distant deity to conscious recognition of what's already present. The entire energy of your spiritual practice evolves from exhausting striving to peaceful allowing. What was once a struggle transforms into a natural, effortless unfolding of your divine nature. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a fundamental shift in how you perceive yourself in relation to the divine. Rather than seeing yourself as a separate entity trying to reach an external God through effort, discipline, or perfect behavior, you begin to recognize your essential oneness with divine source. This revelation completely reshapes the journey from one of achievement to one of awakening. This mindset revolution becomes even clearer when we look at another profound statement Jesus made that perfectly aligns with "You are God's." When he proclaimed, "I and my Father are one," many religious traditions have interpreted this as a special claim unique to Jesus alone, something that set him apart from humanity. But that interpretation misses the revolutionary impact of what Jesus was actually revealing. The hidden truth is that Jesus wasn't making an exclusive claim that applied only to himself. He was unveiling a universal truth about every human being's relationship with divine source. This was never meant to be a special revelation that separated Jesus from humanity, but rather one that invited all of humanity to recognize their true nature. The decisions we make from this understanding are entirely different from those made from a mindset of separation. When you recognize that oneness with the divine isn't something you need to achieve through decades of spiritual practice, meditation, or religious devotion, but is instead the very foundation of your existence, everything changes. Your spiritual journey shifts from seeking something outside yourself to recognizing what has always been present within and expressing through you. This realization isn't about inflating the human ego or claiming some special status. It's about aligning your conscious awareness with the deeper reality of your being. It's about removing the veils of misperception that have hidden your true nature from yourself. The impact of this understanding ripples through every aspect of your life, from how you pray, to how you relate to others, to how you face life's inevitable challenges. Now, I want to explore a powerful metaphor that makes this truth impossible to misunderstand. A metaphor that completely transforms how you perceive your relationship with the divine source. Because once you truly grasp this principle, you'll never again approach spirituality from a mindset of separation and lack. If you're beginning to see your spiritual journey in a completely new light through this understanding, write in the comments, "I see my divine nature." Imagine the vast ocean with its countless waves rising and falling across its surface. Now, consider this revelation. A wave is not separate from the ocean trying desperately to become oceanic. It already is ocean temporarily expressing in wave form. The wave's entire existence, substance and power come directly from the ocean itself. Its very being is oceanic in nature, regardless of its temporary appearance as a distinct form. Click the subscribe button now to continue this journey of spiritual awakening as we explore what it truly means to live from the understanding that you are God's. This metaphor isn't merely a beautiful analogy. It's a profound revelation about the nature of reality itself and your place within it. You are not a human being trying to reach God through spiritual practices, perfect behavior, or religious devotion. You are divine life, temporarily expressing in human form. The boundary we perceive between humanity and divinity exists only in our perception, not in the fundamental nature of reality. The wave doesn't need to strive or struggle to become more oceanic. It simply needs to recognize what it already is. Similarly, your spiritual journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about recognizing what you've always been beneath the surface-level identity that feels separate and limited. Behind the scenes of this misperception is what Joel Goldsmith, one of the great mystical teachers of the 20th century, identified as the root cause of all human suffering: the belief in separation. This single misunderstanding creates a mindset that generates endless pain, anxiety, and limitation in our lives. Think about this revelation for a moment. The primary source of our suffering, our sense of lack, our feeling of isolation, all stem from this one misperception that we are somehow separate from our divine source. When you begin living from the consciousness that the divine is your actual source and substance, not just poetically or metaphorically, but literally, everything changes. The transformation is not just in your thinking, but in your entire experience of life. You stop approaching your spiritual journey from a mindset of scarcity and separation. You stop begging and pleading for what you need, as though addressing some distant deity who might or might not respond. Instead, you start receiving, naturally recognizing that what you need is already present within the divine flow of your being. This shift in awareness creates a profound impact in how you navigate life's challenges. You stop efforting and struggling against the current of life, and you start allowing the divine nature to flow through you naturally and effortlessly. This doesn't mean your human life suddenly becomes problem-free, but rather that you approach those problems from an entirely different state of consciousness. The decisions you make from this place of understanding create entirely different results than those made from a consciousness of separation. Now, I want to explore what happens when this profound understanding begins to shape your everyday practices, particularly in how you approach prayer. Because the practical power of this realization becomes crystal clear when you're facing life's inevitable challenges and difficulties. If you've experienced moments of this profound sense of oneness, even briefly type "I am ocean, not just wave" in the comments below. Consider the stark contrast in how prayer transforms when you truly grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's." A person who perceives divinity as distant and separate naturally prays from that mindset. "Please God, help me with this problem." Their entire approach stems from a consciousness of separation, lack, and dependency on an external power. It's the prayer of someone who fundamentally sees themselves as cut off from the divine source, but someone who has awakened to the truth that Jesus revealed prays in an entirely different way. Their prayer isn't about begging an external deity for intervention. It's about recognizing what's already present. They acknowledge that divine wisdom isn't something distant they need to acquire or convince to help them. It's already present within as their true nature and inheritance. This revelation completely revolutionizes the prayer experience. Prayer evolves from a desperate plea to a powerful recognition. It becomes less about asking and more about acknowledging what already is. This mindset shift doesn't just change your words, it alters the entire energy and effectiveness of your spiritual connection. The hidden truth behind Jesus' healing ministry reveals this principle in action. When we examine how Jesus approached healing, we discover something remarkable. He never begged God to intervene from some distant heaven. He never pleaded for divine assistance as though it was separate from him. Instead, he simply acknowledged the divine presence right there in the situation. Jesus recognized a fundamental principle. Where divine presence is acknowledged, wholeness must naturally express. Where divinity flows unobstructed by beliefs in separation, the expression of that divinity is already complete by the very nature of the relationship itself. This wasn't miraculous in the way we typically think. It was the natural manifestation of spiritual law working through someone who fully understood his divine identity. Behind the scenes of every healing Jesus performed was this recognition of divine presence, not as something to be called down from heaven, but as the very substance and reality of the person standing before him. He saw beyond the appearance of disease or limitation to the divine reality that was always present, but obscured by human belief in separation. This journey of revelation isn't about acquiring special powers or becoming superhuman. It's about removing the veils of misperception that have hidden your true nature from yourself. When you begin to grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's," healing becomes less about fixing something broken and more about revealing the wholeness that was never actually lost. The transformation that occurs when you approach prayer from this understanding is profound. Rather than approaching the divine as a beggar hoping for help, you approach as one who recognizes their inheritance. The energy shifts from desperate pleading to peaceful acknowledgement. The entire experience changes from anxiety to assurance, from uncertainty to recognition. Let me share what makes this understanding so powerful in your everyday experience. Divine resources aren't something you need to hunt down, earn, or convince to come your way. They're your inheritance through the simple fact of relationship. If you've ever experienced a moment where simply shifting your perception transformed a situation without any external change occurring, write "perception is everything" in the comments. Just as a child naturally inherits traits and resources from their parents without having to beg for them, you naturally have access to divine qualities through your essential connection to the source. This principle of divine inheritance transforms our entire understanding of how spiritual resources flow into our lives. For your entire life, you've likely been taught to seek God's help as if you were fundamentally separated from divine supply. This seeking mindset creates an endless spiritual quest, always reaching for something that seems just beyond your grasp. But here's the breakthrough revelation that changes everything about your spiritual journey. Divine wisdom isn't something you need to hunt down, earn through spiritual merit, or convince to come your way. It's your inheritance through the simple fact of relationship. Divine peace isn't a distant quality that might flow to you. Someday, if you're worthy enough, it's already flowing through you right now as your true nature. The same applies to every divine quality: abundance, creativity, love, strength, and intelligence. These aren't external resources you need to somehow acquire. They're already present within your being as your divine inheritance. When this understanding truly takes root in your consciousness, your entire prayer life undergoes a remarkable transformation. It evolves from begging into recognition, from anxious effort into restful knowing, from desperate pleading into peaceful receiving. However, this profound truth requires realistic expectations about how this transformation manifests in your experience. People who embrace this understanding often expect immediate physical results or instant miracles in their circumstances. But here's the crucial insight that prevents disappointment on this journey. This recognition of your divine nature doesn't always produce immediate physical results or instant miracles. What it does produce is an immediate shift in consciousness that then gradually manifests in your outer experience over time. Consider how a seed transforms into a plant. The moment the seed is planted and watered, its transformation begins, but invisibly beneath the surface. For days, sometimes weeks, nothing appears to be happening, but profound changes are occurring at the invisible level before any visible growth appears. Your spiritual awakening follows this same natural pattern. The inner transformation precedes the outer manifestation. Your consciousness shifts first, and then your circumstances begin to reflect that shift. The timeline varies for each person and situation, but the principle remains constant. This understanding helps you avoid the discouragement that comes from expecting instant results, while still maintaining complete faith in the process. This is realistic spirituality, not magical thinking that promises overnight transformation. The journey unfolds naturally, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, depending on how deeply ingrained the patterns of separation consciousness have been in your life. But the trajectory is always the same: inner awakening gradually reshaping outer experience. When this revelation becomes your living consciousness rather than just an intellectual concept, you stop operating from fear-based decisions and begin living from divine assurance. Your actions flow from a completely different source, not from the desperate need to get something you lack, but from the overflow of what you already possess in your divine nature. Let me share a powerful practice that helps anchor this recognition in your daily consciousness. Because this journey isn't just theoretical, it's meant to transform how you experience every aspect of your life from the inside out. If you've experienced a situation where inner transformation led to outer changes in your life, type "inner creates outer" in the comments below. Now I want to explore what might be the most profound dimension of understanding Jesus' declaration, "You are God's." The radical recognition that you inherit divine nature, not human limitation. This revelation completely transforms what you believe is your natural state of being. Most of us have been conditioned to accept limitation, lack, struggle, and fear as our default human condition. We've been taught that we must strive and struggle to acquire qualities like peace, wisdom, love, and abundance. We approach these divine qualities as if they're distant treasures that only the spiritually elite might eventually attain after years of devoted practice. But this revolutionary understanding flips that entire paradigm. Peace is not something distant that you must acquire through years of spiritual practice or struggle. It is your inheritance, your natural state as divine expression. Wisdom is not something you fundamentally lack that must be painfully accumulated. It is your birthright flowing naturally from your divine nature. The same applies to every divine quality: abundance, joy, love, creativity, and strength. These aren't external resources you need to somehow convince to enter your experience. They're already flowing through you as your true nature, often obscured by beliefs in separation and limitation. This perspective creates a complete mindset revolution. When this realization becomes your living consciousness rather than just an intellectual concept, you stop operating from fear-based decisions and begin living from divine assurance. Your actions flow from a completely different source, not from the desperate need to get something you lack, but from the overflow of what you already possess in your divine nature. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a fundamental shift in identity. You no longer see yourself primarily as a limited human personality struggling to connect with divinity. Instead, you recognize yourself as divine expression, temporarily experiencing human form. This doesn't make you arrogant or separate you from humanity. It actually connects you more deeply with all life by recognizing the same divine presence expressing through everyone and everything. But this profound truth requires more than intellectual understanding. It needs to become your lived experience. That's where practical application becomes essential. Let me share a powerful practice that helps anchor this recognition in your daily consciousness. Begin by sitting quietly each morning for just 10-15 minutes before your day unfolds. This isn't complicated meditation requiring special techniques. It's simply quiet recognition. The revolutionary aspect is that you don't ask God for anything during this time. Instead, you simply acknowledge the truth. I am divine expression right now. My breath, my consciousness, my very being in this moment is divine life expressing. As thoughts of problems, concerns, or limitations naturally arise, don't fight them or try to suppress them. Instead, gently return to recognition. Divine presence is my true nature. Whatever appears as challenge or lack in my human experience, the divine reality of wholeness and abundance is present now as the truth of my being. This practice isn't about creating something new, it's about recognizing what already is. You're not trying to manufacture divine qualities through affirmation or visualization. You're acknowledging the reality that exists beneath the appearance of limitation. This distinction makes all the difference in the effectiveness of your spiritual practice. Let me share another powerful practice that transforms how you move through your daily life while living from this recognition of your divine nature. Because the journey of awakening isn't limited to your quiet morning moments, it extends into every aspect of your life experience. If you've tried positive thinking techniques without lasting results, comment below with recognition over affirmation to share how this approach feels different to you throughout your day, particularly in those moments when you feel yourself straining against circumstances or becoming anxious about situations. There's a powerful practice that can create an immediate shift in your experience. I call it the pause practice, and it's deceptively simple yet profound in its impact. When you notice yourself feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, or anxious about any situation, pause for just a moment. Take one conscious breath, then silently acknowledge this truth. Divine intelligence is operating in this situation right now. This simple practice creates a remarkable shift in your experience. You'll literally feel yourself releasing the weight of trying to control outcomes through limited human will alone. This momentary pause and recognition interrupts the habitual pattern of separation consciousness that creates so much unnecessary suffering in our lives. Think of it as a pattern. Interrupt that shifts you from the limited human perspective to the broader divine perspective in an instant. This isn't about denying or ignoring real challenges. It's about approaching them from a completely different level of consciousness. The breakthrough happens when you realize you don't have to solve every problem through human effort alone. There is a higher intelligence, a divine wisdom that is already operating in every situation when you step aside and allow it to flow. A woman named Sarah practiced this during a particularly stressful work situation where everything seemed to be falling apart. Instead of pushing harder with human will and getting more frustrated, she paused several times throughout the day to acknowledge, divine intelligence is operating here right now. Within hours, solutions began appearing that no one had considered. This wasn't coincidence. It was the natural result of shifting from separation consciousness to recognition of divine presence. Now I want to reveal what might be the most profound dimension of living from the understanding that you are God's. Learning to live from cause rather than effect. In essence, this means training yourself to recognize that your divine nature is the invisible reality behind all visible forms and circumstances in your life. When you look at your bank account, practice seeing beyond the numbers, which are just effects, to the infinite substance that is your true source, which is cause. When you look at your body, see beyond the appearance to the divine life that animates it. This isn't denial of human reality, it's recognition of a deeper dimension that is equally real, but usually overlooked. This perspective revolutionizes how you respond to circumstances. Instead of constantly reacting to effects, the visible conditions and circumstances that appear in your life, you learn to live from consciousness of cause, the divine reality that precedes and produces those outer conditions. This journey of revelation shifts you from being a victim of circumstances to being consciously aligned with the creative principle that shapes reality. Living from this level of consciousness doesn't make you passive or unrealistic about practical matters. You still take appropriate human action, but those actions now stem from a completely different awareness. They flow from recognition rather than reaction, from abundance rather than scarcity, from trust rather than fear. This creates a fundamental transformation in the quality and effectiveness of everything you do. As we begin to live from this profound understanding that Jesus revealed, something remarkable happens in our experience. The spiritual journey that once felt like an uphill battle transforms into a natural unfolding of your divine nature. You begin to approach life not as a separate entity struggling to connect with divinity, but as divine expression having a human experience. If you've ever experienced a moment where shifting your perception of a situation completely transformed your experience without the situation itself changing, comment, "I've witnessed the power of perception" below. I share these teachings because I've witnessed their transformative power both in my own life and in the lives of countless others who have embraced this understanding. When you truly grasp what Jesus meant by "you are God's," something remarkable happens. The spiritual journey that once felt like an uphill battle transforms into a natural unfolding of your divine nature. You approach life not as a separate entity struggling to connect with divinity, but as divine expression having a human experience. This revelation doesn't make life perfect or problem-free, but it fundamentally changes how you experience those challenges. You face them from recognition of wholeness rather than from a sense of separation and lack. And this makes all the difference. If this message resonated with you today, if you felt something stir within you, As we explored what Jesus truly meant, I'd love to hear from you. Simply comment, "This truth awakens something in me, so I know this message found the right heart." If you found value in these insights, gently tap that like button. It helps others discover these transformative teachings who might be seeking exactly this understanding right now. And if you're not already part of our community, I invite you to subscribe and join us on this journey of spiritual awakening. Each week, we explore these profound truths that liberate us from limitation and reveal our divine nature. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper, exploring how to apply this divine recognition in healing work. Click and continue with me there as we uncover more of what it means to live from the consciousness that you are God's. The familiar passage we think we know. There are certain passages of Scripture we've heard so many times that we've stopped really hearing them. We nod along, confident we've extracted the meaning, applied the lesson, and moved on. John 15:5 is one of those passages. "I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing." Ask most Christians what this verse means, and they'll tell you, stay connected to Jesus. They'll talk about prayer, Bible reading, church attendance, spiritual disciplines that keep you plugged in. And they're not wrong, exactly, but they're missing something profound, something that changes everything about how we understand the Christian life. The revelation most of us overlook isn't about what we need to do, it's about what we fundamentally are, and more importantly, what we aren't. It's about the nature of spiritual fruit and the shocking passivity required to produce it. It's about a way of living that seems completely backward to our achievement-oriented minds. For years, I read this passage as a motivational call to action. Work harder to stay connected, try more diligently to abide, strive to produce fruit for God's glory. But that interpretation misses the entire point of what Jesus is revealing. The vine metaphor isn't primarily about your effort, it's about your identity and position. And when you truly understand it, it will radically transform how you approach faith, spiritual growth, and your entire relationship with God. The agricultural reality, how vines actually work. To understand what Jesus is revealing, we need to understand how vines actually work. Jesus wasn't speaking in abstract theological terms to first-century disciples. He was using an image they understood intimately. Vineyards covered the hills of ancient Israel. These weren't decorative gardens, they were the agricultural backbone of the economy. Here's what every ancient listener would have immediately understood. A branch does not produce fruit through its own effort, ingenuity, or determination. A branch cannot decide to bear grapes. It cannot strategize, plan, or work harder. The branch has one function, and one function only, to remain physically connected to the vine. The life is in the vine. The nutrients flow from the roots, through the trunk, into the branches. The branch receives. That's it. That's the whole job description. The branch doesn't manufacture sap, it conducts it. The branch doesn't create life, it channels life that originates elsewhere. Now here's what's radical. The fruit appears without the branch doing anything to produce it. The branch doesn't squeeze out grapes through determination. It doesn't visualize successful grape production. It doesn't attend seminars on 10 steps to better fruit bearing. The fruit simply emerges as a natural, inevitable consequence of life flowing from the vine through the branch. This is biological reality, not metaphor. If you cut a branch from the vine and prop it up with sticks, water it faithfully, position it in perfect sunlight, and encourage it with motivational speeches, you know what you'll get? A dead stick. It might look alive for a few days, it might even have some leaves that haven't wilted yet, but it will never, ever produce fruit, not a single grape, because the life source has been severed. Conversely, an ugly, twisted, seemingly unpromising branch that remains connected to a healthy vine will produce grapes, not because the branch is particularly noble or hard-working, but because life flows into it from a source beyond itself. This is the agricultural reality Jesus is leveraging, and once you see it, you can never read this passage the same way again. Because Jesus isn't saying, "Try really hard to be a good branch." He's saying something far more fundamental. Understand what you are and what I am. I am the source. You are the recipient. Stay in that relationship and fruit is inevitable. Leave that relationship and fruit is impossible. The identity revelation: you are not the vine. Here's the revelation most of us miss. We keep trying to be the vine. We've been trained to believe that the Christian life is about mustering up more love, generating more joy, manufacturing more patience. We think spiritual growth happens through better systems, stronger willpower, and increased effort. We approach faith like we approach fitness, a matter of discipline, consistency, and grinding it out when we don't feel like it. But Jesus makes a clear distinction. I am the vine, you are the branches. This isn't poetic fluff, this is identity definition. You are not called to be a vine. You cannot become the vine through spiritual maturity. You will never graduate to vinehood. Your position is branch, and that's not a limitation, it's your liberation. The problem is that modern Western Christianity has been deeply infected by self-help philosophy. We've turned the gospel into a divine self-improvement program. Jesus becomes a life coach, the Bible becomes a success manual, and salvation becomes the launching pad for your best life now. In this framework, you're essentially a vine, the source of your own spiritual life, who just needs Jesus to give you better techniques and stronger motivation. But that's not the gospel. That's baptized self-reliance. When Jesus says, "I am the vine," he's making an exclusive claim. He alone is the source of spiritual life, not Jesus plus your effort, not Jesus plus your gifting, not Jesus plus your sincerity. Jesus, period. He is the vine, which means you definitively are not. This is simultaneously humbling and liberating. It's humbling because it strips away any claim to self-sufficiency. You cannot generate spiritual life any more than a branch can generate sap. You are fundamentally dependent, completely, utterly, continuously dependent. But here's the liberation. If you're not the vine, you're not responsible for being the vine. The pressure is off. You don't have to be the source. You don't have to figure out how to manufacture love for that difficult person. You just have to remain connected to the one who is love. You don't have to work up joy in hard circumstances. You just have to abide in the one who is joy. You don't have to produce patience through gritted teeth. You just have to stay attached to the source of all patience. The vine metaphor reveals that your position is not productivity, it's receptivity. Your calling is not to generate but to receive and transmit, and that changes everything. The productivity paradox. Fruit without striving. This brings us to perhaps the most counterintuitive aspect of the vine metaphor. Fruit appears without striving. In fact, striving actually prevents fruit. We need to make a crucial distinction here between fruit and works. The New Testament is clear that we're saved by grace through faith, not by works. But it's equally clear that genuine faith produces fruit. So what's the difference? Works are what you do for God. Fruit is what God does through you. Works originate in your effort, your planning, your energy. Fruit originates in Christ's life flowing through you. Works make you tired. Fruit makes you fruitful. Works can be evaluated by external metrics and human applause. Fruit is often recognized only by those with spiritual perception. Here's the productivity paradox. The more you strive to produce fruit, the less fruit you actually bear, because striving shifts your focus from abiding to achieving. And Jesus is crystal clear. Apart from me, you can do nothing, not some things, nothing, zero spiritual value. You might accomplish impressive religious activities, build large ministries, gain wide influence, but if it's not fruit of the vine, it's just wood, hay, and stubble that will burn away. Think about it agriculturally. A branch doesn't wake up anxious about grape production. It doesn't check its growth metrics or compare its grape yield to neighboring branches. It doesn't attend conferences on maximizing your fruit potential. The branch simply remains in position, receiving life from the vine, and fruit appears as a natural consequence. This is radically different from how most of us approach spiritual growth. We create elaborate systems, Bible reading plans, prayer schedules, accountability structures, ministry commitments. And these aren't bad things, but they become toxic when we unconsciously believe that these activities are what produce fruit. When we think that if we just do more, try harder, add another commitment, we'll finally become the fruitful Christians we're supposed to be. That's vine thinking, not branch thinking. Organic spiritual fruit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These emerge from abiding. They appear when you're so saturated with Christ's presence that his character begins to express itself through you. You don't manufacture them. You don't schedule them. You don't achieve them. They happen to you as you remain in him. I've watched this play out countless times. The most fruitful Christians I know aren't the busiest ones. They're the most restful. They're not running themselves ragged for Jesus. They're sitting with Jesus, walking with Jesus, remaining conscious of Jesus throughout their day. And somehow, almost without trying, they exhibit a supernatural quality of character. Love flows through them. Peace radiates from them. Patience marks their interactions. Not because they worked up these qualities, but because they stayed connected to the source. Meanwhile, I've seen others, myself included, work themselves to exhaustion, trying to be good Christians, grinding through spiritual disciplines, white-knuckling victory over sin, forcing themselves to love and serve, and producing very little genuine fruit, lots of religious activity, lots of visible works, but not much actual fruit of the Spirit. Why? Because we were trying to be vines instead of branches. The pruning process. Growth through cutting. Jesus doesn't stop with the vine and branch metaphor. He introduces a third character. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Wait, he prunes the fruitful branches? That seems backward. Shouldn't he prune the unfruitful ones and leave the fruitful ones alone? But anyone familiar with viticulture knows that pruning is essential for fruit production. An unpruned vine becomes overgrown with leaves and shoots that consume energy without producing grapes. The vine dresser cuts away the excess growth, not because it's bad, but because it's distracting the plant's energy from fruit production. Here's what this means for us. God isn't just interested in you bearing fruit. He's interested in you bearing more fruit, and that requires pruning. Specifically, it requires cutting away things that aren't necessarily sinful or wrong in themselves, but are consuming life that should be directed toward fruit. This is often the most confusing season for believers. You're abiding, you're bearing fruit, life is good, and then suddenly, God starts cutting. He removes opportunities, he closes doors, he strips away activities, relationships, or roles you thought were part of your calling. And it hurts. Pruning always hurts. But here's what we miss. Pruning is evidence of fruit-bearing. If the Father is pruning you, it means you're a fruitful branch. He doesn't prune dead wood, he cuts it away entirely. Pruning is reserved for living, productive branches that he wants to make even more fruitful. What does God typically prune? Often, it's our good works, the religious activities we've accumulated, the ministry commitments that made us feel useful, the busyness that gave us identity, the accomplishments that brought approval. God cuts away the excess so that his life can flow more directly into fewer activities, producing deeper fruit. This is painful because we've often confused these works with fruit. We thought our busy ministry schedule was fruit. We thought our extensive Bible knowledge was fruit. We thought our visible leadership was fruit. But God knows the difference, and in his mercy, he prunes away the works to make room for genuine fruit. The pruning process also cuts away our false dependencies, the things we've been drawing life from, instead of from the vine, our performance, our reputation, our ministry success, our spiritual accomplishments. God cuts these away not to hurt us, but to free us, to force us back into complete dependence on Christ alone. If you're in a season of pruning right now, if life feels like it's being cut back rather than built up, take heart. You're not being punished. You're being prepared for greater fruitfulness. The Father knows what he's doing, and the temporary pain of pruning produces the permanent gain of abundant fruit. The abiding principle, remaining, not achieving. So how do we actually live as branches? Jesus gives us one instruction, repeated multiple times in John 15. Abide, remain, stay, dwell, continue. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. Notice what Jesus doesn't say. He doesn't say, achieve for me. He doesn't say, produce for me. He doesn't say, accomplish for me. He says, abide in me. Abiding is fundamentally passive. It's not about doing, it's about being. It's not about achieving a state, it's about remaining in a position. The Greek word meno means to stay, to remain, to continue, to dwell. It implies settled residence, not frantic activity. Think about what it means to abide in a house. You don't achieve house dwelling through intense effort. You simply remain there. You live there. Your presence is continuous, not sporadic. You don't visit occasionally and call it abiding. Abiding is your normal state of existence. This is what Jesus is calling us to, a continuous, settled, restful awareness of and connection to him. Not a desperate striving to maintain connection, but a peaceful remaining in connection that already exists. Here's what this looks like practically. Abiding means learning to live with a background consciousness of Christ's presence. It's the habit of turning your thoughts toward him throughout the day, not in some hyper-spiritual way, but as naturally as you'd be aware of a close friend walking beside you. Abiding means resisting the compulsion to fix everything yourself. When problems arise, the abiding branch's first instinct isn't to spring into action, but to remain connected, drawing wisdom and direction from the vine. Abiding means learning to distinguish between the Spirit's prompting and your own striving. The Spirit produces fruit, your flesh produces works. The Spirit's leading is usually quiet, clear, and peaceful. Your flesh's urgency is usually loud, anxious, and exhausting. Abiding means being okay with seasons of stillness. Western Christianity is deeply uncomfortable with stillness. We equate spiritual health with constant activity. But some of the most fruitful seasons in a believer's life are the quiet ones, when nothing visible is happening but everything essential is occurring beneath the surface. Abiding also means accepting your dependence. This is perhaps the hardest part for those of us raised in cultures that celebrate independence. We don't want to need anyone, even God. We want to be strong, capable, self-sufficient. But the vine metaphor demolishes self-sufficiency. You need the vine every moment of every day. Your next breath of spiritual life comes from him. Your next moment of genuine love flows from him. Your next ounce of real patience is supplied by him. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop trying to be strong and admit your weakness, His strength is perfected in you. When you stop trying to produce and simply remain connected, fruit appears. The less you rely on yourself, the more He expresses Himself through you. The warning: apart from Him, nothing. Jesus doesn't leave this as a gentle metaphor. He makes it stark. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Nothing. Not some things. Not a little bit. Nothing of eternal value, nothing that counts as spiritual fruit, nothing that survives God's scrutiny. Apart from Christ, you might do many things, impressive things, even religious things, but they amount to nothing in the kingdom of God. This is a sobering reality that cuts through our illusions about spiritual productivity. How much of what we call ministry is actually just religious activity disconnected from the life of the vine? How much of what we count as spiritual growth is just self-improvement with a Christian vocabulary? The test of genuine fruit is simple. Does it require Christ's life to exist, or could you produce it through natural talent, personality, or effort? Could an unbeliever do what you're doing with the same level of effectiveness? If so, you might be producing works, not fruit. This is why Jesus emphasizes both sides of the abiding relationship. Abide in me, and I in you. It's not enough for you to make some external connection to Christian community or practice. Christ Himself must abide in you, His life, His Spirit, His presence actively dwelling within and flowing through. The warning intensifies. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. This isn't primarily about salvation, it's about usefulness and fruitfulness. A branch separated from the vine becomes firewood. It has no other purpose, no other value. How many believers are living as disconnected branches, going through the motions of Christianity while drawing life from other sources? Their career, success, their family, their ministry, reputation, their theological knowledge. These things aren't evil in themselves, but when they become your source instead of Christ, you're severed. You might maintain the appearance of life for a while, but you're not bearing fruit. You're withering. The question we must ask ourselves constantly: what am I actually drawing life from? When I'm discouraged, where do I turn for encouragement? When I'm weak, what do I depend on for strength? When I'm empty, what do I expect to fill me? If the honest answer is anything other than Christ, we've disconnected from the vine. Application: living as branches in a performance-driven world. So, how do we actually live this out in a culture, and often a church culture, that's obsessed with performance, metrics, and visible achievement? First, we must release the pressure to produce. This doesn't mean becoming passive or lazy. It means recognizing that fruit is God's responsibility, not yours. Your responsibility is abiding. His responsibility is fruit-bearing. You cannot do His part, and He won't do yours. This means, practically, stop comparing your fruitfulness to others. Stop anxiously checking for visible results. Stop evaluating your spiritual health by how much you accomplish. The branch doesn't evaluate itself by its grape production. The vine dresser does that. Your job is simply to remain connected. Second, we must shift from doing to being. Christianity is ultimately about identity and relationship, not activity and achievement. Before God calls you to do anything, He establishes who you are, His beloved child, a branch in the true vine. Your doing flows from your being, not the other way around. This means prioritize time simply being with God, over time doing things for God. Cultivate the habit of God's presence throughout your day. Learn to hear His voice in the ordinary moments. Let your service emerge from overflow, not obligation. Third, we must practice what we might call strategic subtraction. If God is pruning, cooperate with Him. What needs to be cut away from your life? What good activities are consuming life that should be directed toward fruit? What ministry commitments have become works instead of fruit? This requires courage because our culture and our flesh equates subtraction with failure. But the vine dresser knows that strategic cutting produces greater abundance. Less can truly be more when it means more life flowing into fewer outlets. Fourth, we must learn to recognize genuine fruit versus manufactured works. Ask yourself, does this love I'm showing flow naturally from abiding, or am I forcing myself to act loving? Does this joy emerge from God's presence, or am I faking happiness? Is this patience a supernatural gift, or am I gritting my teeth? Genuine fruit has a quality of ease, not because it's effortless, but because it's spirit-energized. You're cooperating with divine life rather than generating human effort. You know the difference in how it feels. Fruit brings rest even in difficulty. Works bring exhaustion even in success. Finally, we must embrace the rhythm of abiding. This isn't about adding another spiritual discipline to your overloaded schedule. It's about cultivating moment-by-moment awareness of Christ's presence and dependence on his life. Some practical ways to cultivate abiding. Start your day acknowledging your complete dependence on Christ for everything. Throughout the day, practice breath prayers, short, simple prayers that keep you consciously connected. When facing decisions or difficulties, pause and seek his wisdom before acting. End your day reviewing where you sensed his presence and where you operated in your own strength. The goal isn't perfection in abiding, it's direction toward abiding. You'll forget, you'll drift, you'll try to be the vine instead of the branch. But each time you recognize it, simply return to your position. Reconnect. Remain. The overlooked revelation. So, here's the revelation most of us overlook in John 15. The Christian life is not about trying harder, it's about remaining closer. It's not about producing more, it's about receiving more. It's not about being a better vine, it's about being a more dependent branch. Jesus didn't say, I am the vine, you are junior vines in training. He said, I am the vine, you are the branches. That distinction is everything. Your calling isn't to manufacture spiritual life, it's to remain connected to the source of spiritual life and let him express his life through you. This is radically countercultural, even in Christian circles. Everything in our achievement-oriented world tells us that success requires grinding, striving, and working harder. But the vine metaphor reveals a different path, the path of abiding, receiving, and resting in your position. When you truly embrace your identity as a branch, when you stop trying to be the vine and simply remain connected to the vine, something supernatural happens. Fruit appears. Not the forced, manufactured fruit of religious striving, but the organic, authentic fruit of divine life flowing through you. Love becomes natural, joy becomes your baseline, peace guards your heart, patience marks your interactions, kindness flows from you, goodness characterizes you, faithfulness defines you, gentleness softens you, self-control empowers you. Not because you worked up these qualities through determination, but because you remained connected to the one who is all these things. That's the overlooked revelation of I am the vine. It's not a call to do more. It's an invitation to rest more deeply in who he is and who you are in him. The question isn't, what can I do for God today? The question is, am I abiding in him today? Answer that second question rightly, and the first question answers itself. Because the branch that abides in the vine bears much fruit, not through striving, but through remaining. Apart from him, you can do nothing, but in him, connected to him, depending on him moment by moment, you bear fruit that remains, fruit that glorifies the Father, fruit that reveals the reality of Christ's life in you. That's not religious obligation, that's organic inevitability. That's the life of the branch that knows its source. So stop trying to be the vine, embrace your identity as the branch, abide, remain, rest in your position, and watch what he produces through you. Imagine standing in a completely dark room. You can't see your hand in front of your face. The darkness is so complete that your eyes strain, searching for even a hint of definition, a shadow, an outline, anything. Then someone lights a single candle. What happens? The darkness doesn't gradually fade, it instantly retreats. The flame doesn't struggle or compete with the darkness. It simply exists, and by existing, it conquers. This is the image Jesus painted when he spoke those electrifying words in Matthew 5:16, "Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." But here's what most people miss. Jesus wasn't giving a motivational speech about being more visible or making a bigger impact. He was revealing a spiritual law as fundamental as gravity. Light, by its very nature, shines. It can't help but shine. The question isn't whether light will shine, but whether we'll allow the light within us to remain unobstructed. Today we're going beyond the Sunday school understanding of this verse. We're diving into the revolutionary depths of what Jesus was truly saying, a message that challenged the religious establishment of his day and continues to challenge our modern assumptions about faith, humility, and authentic influence. This isn't a call to religious performance. It's an invitation to a transformation so profound that others can't help but notice, not because you're trying to be noticed, but because genuine light cannot be hidden. The revolutionary context: to understand the radical nature of Jesus' words, we must first understand the world he spoke them into. First-century Judaism had become, in many ways, a religion of external observation. The Pharisees had constructed an elaborate system of visible righteousness, public prayers in the marketplaces, conspicuous almsgiving, fasting with disfigured faces to ensure everyone knew they were fasting. They believed that godliness was demonstrated through meticulous, external compliance with religious law. Your standing before God, and more importantly before the community, was measured by what others could see and verify. Religion had become performance art. Then Jesus arrived and systematically dismantled this entire paradigm. In the Sermon on the Mount, he doesn't begin with external behaviors. He begins with internal states. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. These are invisible qualities. No one can see poverty of spirit. No one can measure meekness with external tools. He then moves to describe his followers using two metaphors that would have shocked his audience: salt and light. Both are transformative by their essential nature, not by their effort. Salt doesn't try to preserve food, it preserves by being salt. Light doesn't strive to illuminate, it illuminates by being light. This was revolutionary because Jesus was saying that true righteousness isn't something you perform, it's something you are, and when you are transformed at that deep level, the external evidence becomes inevitable, not manufactured. But notice the careful balance Jesus strikes. Right before telling his disciples to let their light shine, he had just warned them about practicing their righteousness before men to be seen by them. Right after telling them to shine their light, he would warn them about doing righteous acts for public recognition. So which is it? Should we be visible or invisible? This apparent contradiction is actually the key to understanding everything. Jesus is making a crucial distinction between the authentic overflow of transformation and the calculated performance of religiosity. One seeks glory for God, the other seeks glory for self. One is light shining naturally, the other is a spotlight turned on oneself. The religious leaders of Jesus' day had it completely backwards. They made a grand show of their public religious activities while harboring hearts full of pride, judgment, and hypocrisy. Jesus was calling for the exact opposite, a transformed heart that naturally produces visible fruit without the self-conscious performance or the hunger for human applause, understanding the light within. So what exactly is this light that Jesus speaks of? To understand this, we need to go back to the beginning, literally to Genesis, where God's first creative act was to speak light into existence. "Let there be light," God said, and there was light, before the sun, moon, or stars were created. This primordial light wasn't just physical illumination, it was the visible manifestation of God's presence and glory. Throughout Scripture, light is consistently associated with God Himself. God is light, and in Him is no darkness at all, writes the Apostle John. The psalmist declares, "The Lord is my light and my salvation." When Moses came down from Mount Sinai after encountering God, his face shone so brightly that people couldn't look at him. When Jesus was transfigured on the mountain, his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. Light represents truth, purity, holiness, life, and revelation. Darkness represents deception, sin, death, and hiddenness. Throughout the biblical narrative, these two forces are in constant tension, but light always possesses the superior power. Darkness cannot overcome it. Now here's the stunning claim Jesus makes: you are the light of the world. Not, you should try to be or you might become, you are. This is an identity statement, not an aspiration. If you are in Christ, if you have been born again by the Spirit of God, then you possess within you the very light of God's presence. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 4:6, "For God, who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' made His light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ." The same creative power that spoke light into existence in Genesis has spoken light into your heart. This isn't metaphorical, it's the actual presence of Christ within you, the hope of glory. But here's what we must understand. This light is not our own goodness or natural charisma or accumulated religious achievements. The light is Christ Himself living within us. As Jesus said in John 8:12, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." We are light bearers, not light generators. The moon doesn't create its own light, it reflects the sun's light. Similarly, we don't manufacture our own spiritual illumination through effort or discipline. We reflect Christ's light as we remain connected to Him, as we allow His presence to fill us and His character to be formed in us. This understanding completely transforms the pressure we might feel about shining our light. You cannot shine what you don't possess. You cannot reflect what you're not looking at. The primary work, then, isn't about trying harder to shine. It's about maintaining your connection to the source of light, cultivating intimacy with Christ, allowing His nature to increasingly become your nature. When Jesus said, "Let your light shine," the word "let" is crucial. It's not make your light shine or force your light shine. It's let, as in permit, allow, release. The light is already there. The question is whether we'll remove the obstacles that obstruct it. The paradox of humble visibility. This brings us to one of the most beautiful and confusing paradoxes in Christian living. How do we shine brightly while remaining genuinely humble? How do we be visible without being showy? How do we let our good deeds be seen without doing them to be seen? This tension has confused believers for centuries. Some resolve it by embracing extreme visibility, turning faith into performance and ministry into personal branding. Others swing to the opposite extreme, believing that true humility means hiding all good works, keeping everything private, never speaking about faith or standing out in any way. But Jesus offers a third way, the narrow path between prideful exhibition and false humility, and the key lies in understanding the purpose statement he attaches to his command, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. The issue isn't visibility itself, it's the direction that visibility points. When your light shines in a way that draws attention to God's goodness, wisdom, power, and love, you're fulfilling Jesus' instruction. When your light shines in a way that draws attention to your own goodness, wisdom, power, or spirituality, you've missed the point entirely. Think about it this way. When you enter a beautifully lit room, you don't praise the light bulbs. You appreciate what the light reveals, the architecture, the artwork, the faces of friends. The light itself fades into the background while making everything else visible. Similarly, when we shine properly, people's attention moves through us to God. We become transparent rather than opaque. This is why the most powerfully influential Christians throughout history have often been the most humble. They weren't hiding their light under a bushel, but neither were they performing for applause. Mother Teresa became world famous not because she sought fame, but because authentic love in action is impossible to ignore. Her light shone brightly, but it always pointed beyond herself to Christ. The paradox resolves when we understand that biblical humility isn't thinking less of ourselves, it's thinking of ourselves less. A truly humble person isn't constantly worried about whether they're being too visible or not visible enough. They're simply responding to need, doing the next right thing, loving the person in front of them, and letting the results rest in God's hands. Pride enters when we become self-conscious about our visibility, when we start calculating the impact of our actions, when we position ourselves for maximum recognition. But pride can also masquerade as humility, hiding God-given gifts and opportunities because we're afraid of appearing prideful. Both extremes stem from the same root, an excessive focus on self. True humility says, I have light not because I'm special, but because God is generous. This light isn't mine to hoard or to leverage for my own benefit. It's meant to illuminate others' paths, to reveal truth, to make God's goodness visible. From that posture, we neither hide nor flaunt. We simply shine naturally, without apology and without pride. What dims our light if we are the light of the world by virtue of Christ's presence within us? Why do so many believers seem to lack that radiant, transformative quality Jesus described? What dims the light that should naturally shine? Jesus himself points to the first major obstruction, intentional hiding. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. This is the temptation to keep our faith private, to compartmentalize our spirituality, to avoid any situation where our beliefs might make us uncomfortable or subject to scrutiny. We dim our light through fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood or labeled. In an increasingly secular culture, many Christians have absorbed the message that faith is purely private, that bringing Christ into public conversations is inappropriate or pushy. But a lamp hidden under a bowl serves no one, including itself. Without ventilation, it eventually suffocates and goes out. Faith that's never expressed atrophies. Light that's never allowed to shine begins to fade. The second major obstruction is sin, specifically unrepented, ongoing sin. You cannot simultaneously embrace darkness and shine light. John writes, if we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. Sin creates a film of darkness around the light within us, dimming its brightness, distorting its beams. This is why hypocrisy is so spiritually devastating. When our public image dramatically contradicts our private reality, we're not shining light, we're creating optical illusions. People eventually see through the facade, and their disillusionment doesn't just affect them, it causes them to stumble and question the authenticity of the gospel itself. Third, we dim our light through spiritual neglect. Remember, we're not the source of light, we're reflectors and conductors of Christ's light. When we stop spending time in God's presence, stop feeding on His Word, stop engaging in genuine worship and prayer, we're like solar panels covered in dust. The sun is still shining, but we're no longer positioned to receive and transmit its energy. It's possible to become so busy doing things for God that we lose connection with God Himself. We substitute activity for intimacy, accomplishment for abiding, and gradually, imperceptibly, our light dims. We're still going through the motions, but the radiant life, the contagious joy, the transformative presence, it fades. Fourth, we dim our light through bitterness, unforgiveness, and judgment. These toxins eat away at the soul from the inside, clouding the light with dark emotions. You cannot shine brightly while harboring resentment. You cannot radiate grace while nursing grudges. The light gets choked by the weeds of a hardened heart. Finally, and perhaps most subtly, we dim our light through conformity to the world's patterns. Paul warns, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." When we adopt the world's values, priorities, speech patterns, entertainment choices, and lifestyle without discernment, we gradually lose our distinctive witness. The light doesn't disappear entirely, but it becomes so filtered and diluted that it no longer provides meaningful contrast to the surrounding darkness. The world doesn't need more Christians who look, sound, and act exactly like everyone else, just with a religious label attached. It needs people so transformed by Christ's presence that they bring something genuinely different. A different kind of strength, a different source of peace, a different response to suffering, a different way of treating others. Practical expressions of shining. So what does it actually look like to let your light shine before men? How does this theological truth translate into daily life? First, it shines through the quality of your character when no one is watching. Your private integrity creates the authentic foundation for public witness. The person you are when you're alone, the thoughts you entertain, the choices you make when there's no social pressure, this is where light either flourishes or fades. When that private character becomes your consistent reality, people encounter something authentic when they interact with you. Second, your light shines through radical love that transcends normal human boundaries. Jesus said the world would know His disciples by their love for one another, not by their theological precision or their Bible knowledge or their worship style, but by their love. When you love the unlovable, when you serve those who can't repay you, when you forgive those who have wounded you, when you're kind to those who oppose you, this is light breaking into darkness. Practical love always gets noticed because it's so rare. The person who consistently chooses patience in traffic, grace in disagreements, generosity toward the needy, and kindness toward difficult people will stand out dramatically. This isn't about perfection, it's about trajectory, about a visible difference in how you respond to life's inevitable frustrations and disappointments. Third, your light shines through excellence and integrity in your work. Whether you're a student, an employee, a business owner, or a homemaker, how you approach your responsibilities speaks volumes. Do you cut corners? Do you gossip about co-workers? Do you do the minimum required, or do you work with diligence, honesty, and a servant's heart, not to impress people, but because you're ultimately working for the Lord? Colossians 3:23 instructs, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." When your motivation shifts from earning human approval to honoring God, your entire approach to work transforms. People notice those who consistently deliver quality, who maintain integrity under pressure, who treat others with respect regardless of their position. Fourth, your light shines through how you handle suffering and disappointment. Anyone can be joyful when life is going well. But when you face loss, betrayal, illness, or failure with grace, hope, and even peace, that's supernatural. That's light-piercing darkness. People are watching how you respond to the trials they know you're facing, and authentic faith in those moments is profoundly compelling. This doesn't mean pretending you're fine when you're not, or suppressing real grief and pain. It means allowing God's presence to sustain you genuinely, to provide real comfort, to maintain hope even in dark circumstances. When Paul and Silas sang hymns in prison at midnight, their light shone so brilliantly that it led to their jailer's salvation, not their preaching, their response to suffering. Fifth, your light shines through words of grace, truth, and encouragement. Your speech patterns reveal your heart's content. Do your conversations typically center on complaints, criticism, and negativity? Or do you speak words that build up, that offer perspective, that bring hope? Do you participate in destructive gossip, or do you redirect conversations toward constructive ends? Ephesians 4:29 instructs, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." When your words consistently bless rather than curse, heal rather than harm, people experience the light of Christ through your speech. Sixth, your light shines through vulnerability and authenticity about your own journey. Ironically, one of the most powerful ways to point people to Christ is by being honest about your own struggles and your need for Him. When you share how God has worked in your failures, how He's meeting you in your weakness, how His grace sustains you, this creates connection and removes the barrier of perceived perfection. People aren't looking for flawless Christians, they're looking for honest ones who serve a faithful God. Your willingness to admit mistakes, to apologize when you're wrong, to share your real struggles while pointing to God's real sufficiency. This is light shining with credibility and power. Finally, your light shines through bold, gracious witness when the Spirit opens doors. Sometimes letting your light shine means verbally sharing the reason for the hope you have, not in a pushy, awkward, or judgmental way, but in response to genuine interest that your life has generated. When someone asks, "How do you stay so peaceful?" or "Where do you find your joy?" that's an open door to let your light shine through words. The purpose, that they may glorify your Father. We return now to the purpose clause that Jesus attached to His instruction, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Everything hinges on this phrase. It's not enough for people to see our good deeds. The ultimate purpose is that these deeds would direct their attention and praise toward God. This is what separates kingdom work from mere humanitarian effort. Both may involve feeding the hungry, clothing the poor, visiting prisoners, and caring for the sick. But kingdom work has a transcendent purpose, revealing the character and glory of God so that people might glorify Him. This means our good deeds should somehow make God's nature visible, His compassion, His justice, His generosity, His wisdom, His power. When we love our enemies, we're revealing that God is loving. When we forgive those who wrong us, We're demonstrating that God is merciful. When we serve without expecting anything in return, we're showing that God is gracious. The glory of God is the weight of who He is, His character, attributes, and nature made visible and impactful. When our lives consistently manifest His character in ways that seem supernaturally empowered, people encounter God through us. They may not yet understand what they're encountering, but they sense something beyond normal human capacity. This is why Jesus emphasized good deeds plural, not just one dramatic gesture, but a consistent pattern of life that bears witness to transformation. One act of kindness might be admirable. A lifestyle of countercultural love becomes compelling evidence of divine intervention. But notice the humility embedded in this purpose statement. The deeds are seen, but God receives the glory. This is only possible when we consistently point away from ourselves. When someone compliments your patience, you can say, "I'm learning that from Jesus, I'm definitely still growing." When someone admires your generosity, you can respond, "I've experienced such overwhelming generosity from God, it makes me want to pass that along." This isn't false humility or a religious formula, it's authentic redirection. You're not denying the good deed, you're clarifying its source. You're making visible the invisible God who's at work in and through you. The ultimate goal is that people would move from seeing your good deeds to encountering your good God, from admiring your character to discovering its source, from respecting you to worshiping Him. This is what it means for your light to shine properly. It illuminates the path to the Father. Transformational conclusion. We've journeyed through the depths of Jesus' revolutionary instruction to let our light shine before men. We've discovered that this isn't a call to religious performance or self-promotion, but an invitation to authentic transformation that naturally becomes visible. The question now is profoundly personal. Is your light shining? Not, are people noticing you, but rather, is Christ visible through you? Are people encountering something in your presence that points them toward God? Perhaps as you've listened, the Holy Spirit has revealed areas where your light has been dimmed, through fear, through sin, through neglect, through bitterness, through conformity. The beautiful truth is that light can be restored. The lamp that's gone out can be reignited. The dusty solar panel can be cleaned. It begins with honest confession. God, I've been hiding. I've been compromising. I've been neglecting our relationship. I've been harboring darkness. I've been trying to shine in my own strength. He is faithful and just to forgive and to cleanse. It continues with renewed commitment to abiding in Christ. I cannot shine on my own. I'm not the source, I'm the conduit. My only job is to stay connected to you, to let your life flow through me, to keep your truth before my eyes and your love in my heart. And it manifests in courageous release. I will no longer hide who I am in Christ. I will no longer be ashamed of the gospel. I will no longer conform to patterns that contradict your nature. I will no longer dim my light through fear or compromise. I will let my light shine, not for my glory, but for yours. Imagine what would happen if every believer truly embraced this calling. Imagine workplaces transformed because Christians stopped compartmentalizing their faith and started manifesting Christ's character naturally in their daily interactions. Imagine neighborhoods changed because believers loved their neighbors with supernatural generosity and grace. Imagine schools impacted because students refused to participate in destructive patterns and instead modeled something radically different. This isn't fantasy. This is what Jesus commissioned when He declared, "You are the light of the world." Not you might be or you should try to be. You are. The light is within you. The question is whether you'll let it shine. The world is desperately dark. People are stumbling, searching, longing for something real, something true, something that transcends the superficial promises of materialism, hedonism, and self-actualization. They need light, not the artificial brightness of religious performance, but the authentic radiance of Christ's presence in transformed lives. You have that light. You are that light. The darkness cannot overcome it. Don't hide it under a bowl of fear, compromise, neglect, or conformity. Remove the obstructions. Maintain your connection to the source. Let your good deeds make God's character visible. And trust that as your light shines naturally, authentically, humbly, people will see and give glory to your Father in heaven. This is your calling. This is your identity. You are the light of the world. Now let that light shine.